On the day of my daughter's funeral, my parents were nowhere to be seen. Worried, I called them. My mother sighed. There's no point in us going. Your sister and I are relaxing. Then my sister laughed. We're having cocktails on a Hawaiian beach. Stop talking about sad things, okay? I quietly cut ties with them. When they returned, what waited for them was autumn in Cleveland. Every morning, Emily Carter rises early from her modest single-family home in a quiet Ohio neighborhood to start her day. She has worked as a school librarian at the local elementary school for over 10 years. Her conscientious personality and deep affection for children have earned her the trust of colleagues and parents alike. Sophie, time to get up, Emily knocks on her daughter's bedroom door upstairs, but there is no answer. Of course not, that room is empty now. Habits are terrifying things. Even a month after Sophie's death, Emily's body automatically goes through the motion of waking her daughter. 10-year-old Sophie lost her battle with childhood leukemia last month after being diagnosed last year. Until Sophie drew her final breath, Emily never left the hospital for a single day. While eating breakfast, Emily glances at the family photo hanging on the wall. The picture, taken 3 years ago, shows what was once a happy family of 3: Emily, her ex-husband Daniel, and Sophie when she was healthy. Though divorced for 3 years now, Emily maintained a good relationship with Daniel. He was a responsible father who took joint custody seriously and remained by Sophie's side throughout her illness. I wonder what my parents are doing right now, Emily thinks as she picks up her coffee cup. Emily's parents, Richard and Margaret, ran a successful real estate company in suburban Cleveland. They were always immersed in their work, proud of their success and affluent lifestyle. Their luxurious mansion and expensive cars were testament to how much they valued social status. Money isn't everything, Emily whispers to herself as she looks out the window. For Emily, her relationship with her parents had always been complicated. From childhood, she couldn't remember receiving sufficient affection from them. In Richard and Margaret's eyes, Emily was always not enough. Even when she excelled in school, they would say, "You could have done better." And when she majored in education in college, they were disappointed, saying, "You should have chosen a more lucrative profession." Meanwhile, her younger sister Laura was always their parents' favorite. She worked at their real estate company and lived the life Richard and Margaret expected. Laura was successful, radiant, and beloved by their parents at least. That's how it appeared to Emily. When are Grandma and Grandpa coming? Sophie had asked this question many times during her illness, but Richard and Margaret rarely visited the hospital. They always had excuses, like important meetings or being in the middle of a big deal, postponing time with their granddaughter. Though pained by her parents' coldness, Emily put on a brave face for her daughter. "Grandma and Grandpa are really busy, but they're very worried about you," she would say while holding Sophie's hand. However, on that early morning when Sophie's condition suddenly deteriorated, Emily's first call was to her parents. "Sophie's condition has worsened. Please come right away," she pleaded desperately. But Richard and Margaret said they had an important breakfast meeting with clients and promised to come in the afternoon. That promise was never kept. Sophie passed away quietly just after noon, watched over by Daniel and Emily. Without seeing her grandparents' faces one last time, "I need to finish getting ready." Emily stands up and begins preparing for the day. Today is Sophie's funeral, the day to say a final goodbye to her beloved daughter. Emily still couldn't believe it, that child with an angelic smile was no longer in this world. While taking her morning shower, Emily cried. She had decided these would be her last tears. She would be strong at her daughter's funeral for Sophie, to send her off with dignity until the very end. Street. John's church, surrounded by ancient oak trees, was filled with people coming to bid farewell to a little angel. More people than expected had gathered for Sophie's funeral. Emily's colleagues from the elementary school, Sophie's classmates and their families, neighbors, and relatives who had traveled from afar. They had all come to mourn the bright, intelligent little girl. Emily stood near the entrance of the church, quietly greeting people as they arrived. Her ex-husband Daniel had come early and stood beside her. Even after their divorce, they had maintained a good relationship for their daughter's sake. Their bond had grown even deeper by sharing this grief. "Thank you for coming," Emily said softly to a fellow teacher. "I brought the book Sophie loved," the female teacher offered, holding out a book titled The Big Adventures of a Little Girl. It was the book Sophie always borrowed from the school library. The clock showed 10:30 minutes until the service began. Emily suddenly realized something. Her parents and sister were nowhere to be seen. "Aren't Richard and Margaret here yet?" asked her Aunt Elizabeth worriedly. She was Richard's sister and the only person in the family who truly understood Emily. "They should be here soon." "I've contacted them several times," Emily answered while taking out her mobile phone. There were no missed calls or messages from her parents. Emily took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "No word from Laura either?" Elizabeth further inquired. "No, nothing from my sister either. I called yesterday and the day before, but it went to voicemail. What on earth is wrong with them?" Elizabeth's expression showed anger being late to their granddaughter's funeral. Daniel placed his hand on Emily's shoulder. "Are you okay? We could delay the service a bit." Emily shook her head. "No, let's start as scheduled. I don't want to keep Sophie waiting." But internally, she was struggling with intense anxiety and anger. Could her parents really not come? No matter how strained their relationship, this was their granddaughter's funeral. As the start time approached and attendees began taking their seats, the priest approached Emily to inform her that everything was ready. However, Emily was still standing at the entrance, searching for her parents. "Could you wait just 5 more minutes?" Emily asked the priest. "Of course, I understand how you feel." The priest smiled warmly and returned inside. With one last hope, Emily took out her phone and dialed her mother's number. Her heart was pounding one more time. Her parents simply couldn't miss this. After several rings, the call finally connected. "Hello?" Emily's voice trembled slightly. "The service is about to begin. Where are you?" After a brief silence, Margaret's voice came through, but it was cold, as if coming from far away, and there was a sigh. "Emily, listen, what's the point of us coming? I'm taking your sister for some refreshment." Emily couldn't believe her ears. "What are you saying?" "Today is my daughter's funeral." "I know." Margaret's voice had its usual coldness, "but our being there won't change anything. Sophie is gone now. I can't believe this." Emily's voice was shaking. She wasn't sure if it was from anger or sadness. "You just..." Then another voice came through the phone. It was her sister Laura. She seemed to have taken the phone. "Hey, Emily!" Laura's voice was cheerful, sounding somewhat elated. In the background, there were sounds of the ocean, people laughing, and upbeat music. "We're drinking cocktails on a beach in Hawaii. Let's not talk about depressing things, okay?" Emily was at a loss for words. Standing at the church entrance, she was completely frozen. The background sounds told the whole story. Her parents and sister were enjoying a vacation in Hawaii on the day of her daughter's, their granddaughters, their niece's funeral. "Mom and Dad were really tired, so this vacation was necessary," Laura continued. "I'm sad about Sophie, but life goes on. You should start looking forward too, you know." Emily clutched the phone with trembling hands. She remembered Sophie's face during her illness, saying so many times, "I want to see Grandma and Grandpa." The image of her daughter enduring pain, but still looking forward to seeing her grandparents, and now, on her daughter's final day, her parents were drinking cocktails on a beach. "I understand." Emily's voice suddenly became cold and composed, as if she were a different person. "This is the end. Don't contact me again." "What are you saying?" "That's so dramatic," cutting off Laura's words. Emily hung up. Daniel, who had been standing there, immediately realized something had happened from Emily's expression. "Emily, what happened?" Emily took a deep breath. Not a single tear flowed, only a light of determination shone in her eyes. My parents are in Hawaii. They're on vacation, she said matter-of-factly. What? Daniel raised his voice. You mean it's fine, Emily said quietly. Let's start the service. It's time to say goodbye to our daughter. She walked into the church with dignity. As attendees turned to look, Emily faced straight ahead. Standing next to the priest, she smiled gently. Please begin. Today we celebrate Sophie's life. Let's remember the love and joy she brought to all of us. Throughout the service, Emily did not cry. She stood strong with dignity. She smiled at Sophie's photograph, recited her daughter's favorite poem, and finally placed a small white rose on the coffin. Goodbye, my angel. You will always be in my heart, she whispered. Even as mourners expressed their condolences after the funeral, Emily maintained her composure. However, in her heart, she had made another important decision to completely sever her relationship with her parents and sister. That day, Emily's life split in two. It was a day of grief for losing her beloved daughter and a day when she cut the final ties with her parents. She had resolved to live by her own strength, carrying Sophie's memory in her heart. The sound of cold rain tapping on the window interrupted Emily's thoughts. She sat by the window in the Cleveland Children's Hospital cafeteria, holding her coffee cup with both hands. 2 weeks had passed since Sophie's funeral. The deep sadness continued, but it was no longer the intense pain of before. It had become a dull ache, quietly residing within her. You've been deep in thought. When Emily looked up, Dr. Rachel Levine, Sophie's attending physician, was sitting across from her. Rachel was a pediatric oncologist in her mid-40s who had supported Sophie throughout her battle as her primary doctor. I'm sorry, I was just thinking, Emily smiled. It's okay. I understand. Rachel looked at Emily with kind eyes. Sophie was a wonderful child. Her strength and hope had a big impact on the other children too. Emily nodded, holding back tears. She never gave up. I want to do something to keep her name alive. Rachel looked at Emily with interest. What are you thinking of doing? I haven't decided exactly yet. Emily searched for words. Something like a foundation to support children battling illness like Sophie and their families. Rachel's face brightened. That's a wonderful idea. Actually, I've been feeling the need for such support too. Children fighting diseases need not only medical care but also emotional support. Emily nodded quietly. During Sophie's illness, she had witnessed many families struggling with financial problems and psychological burdens, parents who had to quit their jobs to dedicate everything to their child's treatment, families struggling with transportation costs, to commute from distant places. The Sophie Carter Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Patients, Emily said quietly. What do you think? A perfect name, Rachel agreed wholeheartedly. If there's anything I can do, just let me know. I could serve as a medical advisor. From that day, Emily's new mission began. First, when she told her ex-husband Daniel about the foundation concept, he immediately supported it. Giving back to society what Sophie left behind, that's what she would have wanted. Emily began the process of establishing the foundation with part of the insurance money and her savings. When her school colleagues learned of her initiative, they offered support in various ways. The art teacher helped with logo design, administrative staff assisted with website creation, and the principal provided school facilities as an initial meeting place. The crowdfunding was also surprisingly successful. Many people touched by Sophie's story donated more than twice the target amount in just 1 month. Local media had begun to take notice of this inspiring initiative. An article in the Cleveland Daily titled, "A Little Angel's Big Legacy of Hope" detailed Sophie's battle and the foundation her mother had established. The article featured a smiling photo of Sophie and a poem she had written in her hospital room called, "The Day I'll Fly." Meanwhile, Richard and Margaret, having returned from Hawaii, began to notice the lack of contact from Emily. For the first few days, they thought, Emily is still angry. However, as 1 week, then 2 weeks passed with no contact, they finally began to feel uneasy. Time will resolve this, Margaret told her husband. Emily has always been emotional. She'll contact us when she calms down. But unbeknownst to them, Emily's resolve had hardened. Her relationship with her parents was completely over. In her heart, there was no longer any place for them. One day, a month after Sophie's death, Emily was heading to her office. The foundation's activities had officially begun, and she had taken half-day leave from work to handle foundation business. Her phone rang a call from an unknown number. "This is Michael Brown, an attorney with Green & Associates law firm." A male voice responded politely. "Do you have a moment?" "Yes, that's fine." Emily felt a little tense. "How can I help you?" "Actually, I've been contacted by your mother, Margaret Foster," the lawyer explained calmly. "Your parents have been trying to reach you, but there's been no response. I have nothing to say to them." Emily's voice was cold and clear. "If my parents truly wanted to contact me, why didn't they return immediately from Hawaii? Why didn't they even come to my daughter's funeral?" The lawyer cleared his throat on the other end. "I'm not aware of those details, but..." "Then please relay this message," Emily said quietly but firmly. "I will not be contacting them. I have no intention of ever seeing them again. This decision is non-negotiable." After ending the call, Emily felt strangely lighter. That afternoon, she made a decision to send her parents the letter Sophie had written to her grandparents just before she died. She decided to send the letter through the lawyer. Sophie's last message, written in childish handwriting on white stationery, read, "Dear Grandpa and Grandma, I understand you're too busy to visit me, but I wanted to see you just once before going to heaven. Mommy says you have important work, but I feel lonely. Was I a bad girl? Is that why you didn't come to see me? Love, Sophie." With that letter, she added a brief note from herself. "These are my daughter's last words. The hospital staff has also seen the photos of your Hawaii trip. Please don't contact me again." The day after sending the letter, Emily's phone showed a dozen missed calls, all from her parents, but she didn't answer any of them. She ignored all emails and voicemails. Her resolve was firm. The following week, an event was held for the opening of the foundation's office. It was a small space in a corner of Cleveland Children's Hospital, but it was filled with hope. Many people gathered to celebrate the foundation's launch. As Emily was finishing her speech, Richard and Margaret appeared at the entrance. Margaret's eyes were red from crying, and Richard's expression was filled with anguish. Laura was not with them. As they tried to approach Emily, Dr. Rachel and Daniel stepped in front of them. "Please don't upset Emily today," Rachel said in a calm, professional voice. "This is an important day for her and Sophie." "But we want to," Margaret began, but Daniel interrupted. "That's enough. Emily has made it clear she doesn't want to see you. Please respect that." Richard tried to protest, but noticing the cold stares from those around, he fell silent. They seemed to finally understand that they were completely isolated from everyone present. That night, Emily slept peacefully for the first time in a long while. In her dream, Sophie appeared. "Mom, it's okay. I'm watching over everyone," she smiled. When she woke up, tears were streaming down Emily's cheeks. But these tears came not from sadness, but from quiet relief and determination. Her life from now on would be dedicated to carrying on Sophie's legacy and supporting families experiencing the same suffering. And as for her relationship with her parents, that door was closed forever. On an autumn afternoon, as the trees began to change color, the conference room at Cleveland Clinic was bustling with people, local political and business leaders, medical professionals, and children battling cancer and their families. They had all gathered to celebrate this special day. Today, Cleveland Clinic is proud to announce that a new section of the pediatric ward will be named the Sophie Carter Wing, declared Dr. Robert Simmons, the hospital director, from the podium. Sophie's short life and the dedicated work of the foundation established by her mother, Emily Carter, have deeply impacted our entire community. As applause erupted from the audience, Emily sat quietly next to Daniel. 3 months had passed since Sophie's death. During this time, her foundation had achieved remarkable growth. Thanks to a major donation from a well-known local philanthropist, the foundation was able to provide financial support to families of pediatric cancer patients, hire counselors for emotional care, and even start a program to subsidize transportation and accommodation costs associated with treatment. When Emily took the stage, the room fell silent. Today, I want to express my gratitude to everyone and share my daughter Sophie's dream. Her voice was emotional yet strong. Sophie said she wanted to create a place where sick children could play with smiles on their faces. Today, part of that dream comes true. Her brief speech was moving, particularly her final words, which were etched into many hearts. I'm grateful I could be by my daughter's side at the end. I've realized how important it is to have family who stays with you. Every child has the right to be loved. Every child has the right to be surrounded by those who care until their final moment. These words were broadcast on the local TV news that night. Richard and Margaret watched the news in their living room. Emily's words pierced their hearts like needles, especially the part about how important it is to have family who stays with you, which seemed clearly directed at them. She won't forgive us, will she? Margaret said, holding her wine glass with trembling hands. Richard silently stared out the window. Over the past 3 months, his real estate company had gradually begun losing customers. Long-term clients were terminating contracts one after another, and new clients were decreasing. At first, he thought it was economic fluctuation. But last week, a former client told him the real reason, to be honest. Mr. Foster, continuing to do business with your company has become a risk to my image. I read the article about Sophie's foundation. Remembering those words, Richard grimaced. He could feel the reputation and business he had built over many years beginning to crumble. Loudly, have you heard from Laura? Margaret asked. No, she's probably overwhelmed with her own problems. It was last week when Laura's fiancé's family announced they were breaking the engagement. They had been in a relationship for many years, but the breakup came suddenly. Richard, in his anger, called the fiancé's father. Why? He demanded, to which the fiancé's father coldly replied, Let me be clear, Mr. Foster! We don't want to be associated with people who skip their sick granddaughter's funeral to party in Hawaii. I cannot allow my son to be connected to such a family. Laura was furious at this news. That girl's funeral has nothing to do with us. Unfortunately, these words were recorded by one of her fiancé's friends and spread on social media. Within days, people all over Cleveland had heard the recording, and criticism of Laura poured in. She had to temporarily leave her job and was staying with a friend in another state. The final blow for Richard and Margaret came on Sunday at church. They had been dedicated members of this church for years, but now they had no place there. When the pastor praised Emily's foundation's activities during Sunday service and sought the congregation's support, the gazes directed at them were cold. Christ teaches us to cherish the weak, especially children, the pastor preached passionately. Emily Carter's initiative is precisely putting that teaching into practice. As our church, let us support this wonderful activity. After the gathering, many church members avoided Richard and Margaret, not even greeting them. Margot Pierce, who had been their friend for many years, finally told them the truth. Everyone knows. Richard, Margaret. As Sophie's anniversary approached, the local paper ran a feature on Sophie and the foundation. That article included the contents of Sophie's farewell letter and how she had wanted to see her grandparents until the very end. Yet we've been misunderstood, Margaret desperately tried to explain. At that time, we really had important. That's enough, Margot interrupted with a sad face. I'm telling you this because of our 30 years of friendship. You've made a terrible mistake. If you truly regret it, think about Sophie first and try to understand Emily. Margaret was speechless. On their way home, she and Richard maintained silence. Having lost their social status, respect, friendships, and most importantly, their bond with family, they felt true loneliness for the first time. What should we do? Margaret asked in a small voice after a long silence. Richard made a decision. Let's take our last hope. There's a charity event hosted by Emily's foundation this weekend. Let's go with a donation and try to see her. Do you think she'll meet with us? I don't know, but we have to try. On Saturday evening, Richard and Margaret appeared at the charity gala held at the Cleveland Museum of Art. Looking tense, they dressed modestly and sat inconspicuously in the back. Richard tightly gripped an envelope containing a substantial donation. When the event host introduced Emily and she took the stage, the venue welcomed her with warm applause. Emily spoke calmly about the foundation's activities and future plans. She was no longer a mother crushed by grief, but a strong woman with a mission. After her speech, Emily began mingling with the participants. Richard and Margaret summoned their courage and approached her. "Emily," Margaret called out in a small voice. Emily turned around and saw her parents. There was no surprise in her expression, just quiet recognition. "What can I do for you?" Her voice was calm, devoid of emotion. "Please forgive us." At that time, Margaret began to apologize tearfully. Emily quietly interrupted. "Forgiveness is not easy, but this foundation's work is about keeping Sophie's name alive and supporting families experiencing the same suffering. I appreciate your donation, but I cannot welcome you back into my life." The attendees watched this exchange in silence, and Richard and Margaret fully understood for the first time the irreparable consequences their actions had brought. They quietly handed over the envelope and left the venue without another word. A year had passed since Sophie's death. It was the season when new green leaves sprout, and nature regains life the time Sophie loved most. A voice came from the door. Daniel was standing there with a smile. Emily nodded quietly. "Yes, let's go." Much had changed in this year. Emily had quit her library job to become a full-time staff member of the Sophie Carter Foundation for pediatric cancer patients. The foundation had become recognized throughout the state, partnering with 3 hospitals and supporting dozens of families each month. And another change, Emily and Daniel's relationship. Through the tragedy of losing their daughter, the two had begun to grow close again. Their friendly post-divorce relationship had deepened further through their shared grief and mission. They weren't yet at the stage of being a couple, but something was certainly blossoming. "Today is a special day," Emily said in the car. On Sophie's death anniversary, they were heading to visit her grave. "She would be proud," Daniel answered, keeping his eyes on the road, "of what you've accomplished this year." When they arrived at the cemetery, they walked quietly. As they approached Sophie's grave, an unexpected sight met their eyes. A small bouquet had already been placed there. Emily stopped and picked up the card attached to the bouquet. It read, "We love you, Sophie. From Grandpa and Grandma." They came. Emily's voice was controlled of emotion. "What do you want to do?" Daniel asked. Emily quietly returned the bouquet to its original place and arranged it alongside the flowers they had brought. "These are for Sophie, not for me." That afternoon, when Emily returned to the foundation office, Nurse Linda was waiting for her. "I need to talk to you," Linda said with some hesitation. "Margaret Foster has been hospitalized. Advanced pancreatic cancer, stage 4, Emily gasped. "Since when?" "She was diagnosed 3 weeks ago. She wants to see you." That night, Emily thought long and hard. The next day, she was walking quietly down the hospital corridor. When she entered Margaret's room, there was no trace of the strong mother she once knew, only a frail old woman lying there. Richard stood up with a surprised expression. Without saying anything, Emily sat by the bedside and quietly took Margaret's hand. "I cannot forgive what you did," she said quietly. "But I think Sophie would feel differently. She wanted to see you until the very end." That's who she was. To the tearful Margaret, Emily continued, "I won't become like you. I'll provide the support you need, but this isn't reconciliation. I'm just doing what Sophie would have wanted." After Emily left, Margaret and Richard didn't exchange words. They had lost their fortune, fame, and friends, and most importantly, they had lost the love of their daughter and granddaughter. But today, for the first time, they felt as if a slight gap had opened in what had been a completely closed door. For the next few months, Emily occasionally visited the hospital. She hadn't forgiven her parents, But she didn't want to live in complete hatred either.